Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Stephanie, the Director of Community Engagement, and today I am joined by Debbie Magistrato, our adoption specialist.
Hi, everybody.
And so today we're going to be going over adoptions, the process, the difference between regular adoption and foster to adopt, things like that. So if you guys have any questions at any time, feel free to write it in the comment section, and we'll check those periodically throughout our discussion. So, Debbie, do you want to tell us a little bit about how kids end up in adoption?
How kids end up in adoption. Well, we're a foster family adoption agency. So kids end up in adoption when they are removed from their home due to abuse or neglect and placed in the foster care system. Families have 18 months to work at what is called a case plan. A case plan are the requirements that the Child Protective Services sets forth for the family. Maybe mom has a drug problem. Maybe dad has an anger problem, or mom has an anger problem. So they may be mandated to go to anger management, parenting classes, drug rehab. Families have 18 months, and in that 18 months, they'll have visits with their kids, they'll be working their plan, and they will have court dates every 6 months. So usually when they place children in the home of a foster parent, they're now called resource parents, they're already approved for adoption or guardianship with that written assessment that we do. And somewhere along the process, they determine if the parents aren't going to aren't meeting the goals of their case plan. They will have searched for family or kin. They always want family and kin prior to a foster parent adoption. So a lot of times when they first take the children into care, they'll look for relatives. So then if they place with one of our families and the case is approaching 18 months, by then usually a county social worker will know and will start talking to the foster parent if they're interested in adopting the children. I've placed infants that were going to be quickly adopted, and I think the child was 18 months by the time it finally happened. Sometimes people come out of the woodwork. Sometimes the county will investigate or find a relative or someone out of state, and they'll set up a meet and greet. But usually if a child is placed with a foster parent, the very first thing on that child's plan is reunification with their family. But if that's not happening, then the best thing is for that child to be adopted, to give them a sense of permanency and stability, and to prevent them from moving from home to home to home. So that's how children end up in our homes that are available for adoption.
Okay. Do you see like an average age range of children being adopted?
Years and years ago, they deemed any child 8 years and older not able to be adopted. They were labeled that. And it caused children to grow up in the system and something called foster care drift. Any child can be adopted at whatever age. And as we were speaking earlier, even if they get to the point where they're 17 or so, there's something called adult adoption. So that is simple. It's easy to go to the courthouse and file paperwork. If the young adult is 18 or 19 or 20 and still you're connected to them, you want to make them a member of your family, that's possible. But any age child can be adopted.
So if they're in that 18 to 20 age range, do they have to be in AB 12 or a transitional housing program or anything like that?
No. I mean, they certainly qualify if they're a foster youth. They can be, receive the services and everything. but they could be adopted. I would think I would have a conversation with them. What do they feel? If I'm really committed, if the person's really committed to them and they want to prove that, maybe they want them to be adopted before they turn 21 and emancipate out of that. But to take full benefit of what California has offered foster youth through the THP, independent living skills, college, and extended, I think, up to 24. There's no reason why the person couldn't, adopt them at 24 and 1 month. Take full advantage of what resources are available.
Right. Okay. So can you tell us a little bit about the difference between foster to adopt compared to just regular adoption?
Like an independent or international adoption?
Yeah.
Okay. So we're an adoption agency, but we focus on foster care adoption. An independent adoption would be someone who wants to adopt, so they would pay for a home study. They would have to find an agency that does independent adoptions, and they would be matched, and they would pay lawyer fees and legal fees, and it can be quite expensive. Foster care is you are a foster parent first, and then you can adopt, because all children have to be in the home of the foster parent for 6 months before it can go into adoption. So even families that are specifically interested in adoption still come to a foster family agency, will still need to foster for that first 6 months, and then they can adopt. We have had families come to us that only want to adopt, so we are very selective about the children we place in their homes. We've had families come to us that want to foster and then absolutely fall in love with the kids, and they get to know the kids and they enjoy the children, and then the children unfortunately may move or change. The best thing is always for them to be reunified, but sometimes that falls through, and we've had foster parents who are now adoptive parents who have had, nurtured these children. The children reunify, and then they come back because mom or dad couldn't maintain the safe household for the children. So 2/3 of all the adoptions in California are through foster care. They're not private or independent adoptions. And it's relatively easy to be assessed and go through the home study process. And the thing, especially now that our agency has Bunty and it's all online, you can fill out all your paperwork and you can upload all your documents and you can take your online training and do your orientation. Well, you know that. And so it's really quite convenient. And we still do in-person interviews and the written assessment. But so independent is maybe someone who's having a baby and you work it out, but it's very expensive. Or you go and do foster care, and you can be a non-related extended family member, like if you have a next door neighbor whose children have been removed and you had a relationship with those kids, it's called a NEFRM, a non-related extended family member. And so you could take placement of them, and then should the parents not be able to get them back and there's no other family coming forward, then that's when adoption happens.
So you mentioned that independent adoption is very expensive.
Yes.
Do you have a ballpark on how much?
Tens and 20 and 30 and 40 and 50,000. Yeah, it can be quite expensive because you've got lawyer fees. There's agencies that work with families that want to do that. I think Bethany and maybe Chicks in Crisis and a few agencies like that. But it's It's quite expensive. I'm not an expert. I don't know. I've only done foster care to adopt.
And do you know the cost associated with that one?
$20 per child.
That's a huge difference.
Well, let me explain. Okay, when you become a foster parent and a child is placed in your home, you're actually given a stipend that helps pay for that child in your home. And then, so as long as that child's in your home, you receive that stipend. It's called foster care stipend. Then when the child goes into adoptive placement, the county has decided they want to move forward, and you're agreeing, and we're going to move forward. You go to adoptive placement. At that time, foster care stops and adoptive placement starts. Then you qualify, and you have already agreed with the county on an adoption assistance payment. And that is typically at this point in time the same as a foster care rate. So whatever that rate is, say it's $1,000. So you get paid $1,000 a month for the foster child. Then you go to adoptive placement, and that's $1,000. You get that $1,000 until that child turns 18, or that child has significant needs that you have documented. It's a negotiated rate and it can be renegotiated at any time, but it's reevaluated every 2 years into the adoption. If you have a child that has maybe autism or is a VMRC client, a regional center client, the rate can be higher depending on that child's need. The $20 is the court filing fee. So when I go out to a home, like I'm going out on Monday to a home to do adoptive placement, I'm meeting with the county worker and the adoptive mom, and we all sign papers, and I get paper signed, and I collect $20 per child from the adoptive parent, and I go down to the court, and that's where it gets filed, and it gets reimbursed. You can be reimbursed up to $400. So if the adoptive parent had to pay for their own fingerprints, they can be reimbursed. It's a one-time expense. Parents by choice reimburse for fingerprints and certain things. But if you're an adoptive parent and you had to pay for that yourself, you can be reimbursed. If you had to get a crib or anything that was a one-time expense to facilitate or help with the adoption, that can be reimbursed. So there's the $20 court fee, and then there's adoption assistance program to encourage people to adopt, and that goes until the child turns 18.
Wow.
Yeah.
So it's a lot cheaper.
It's a lot cheaper. And you know, people think that that independent adoptions are I don't know, maybe it's a cousin, maybe it's somebody that you don't know, or maybe all children are DNA loaded. So, you know, neglect is not anything to be ashamed of. Maybe a parent was young and couldn't take care of their child. They got taken into protective custody and ended up being adopted. And it's not $50,000 to adopt, and it's a great way to build your family if you love kids and you're a good parent and you're flexible and have an open heart and open home. It's really a great way to build a family. Yeah.
All right. So you mentioned guardianship earlier.
Yes.
Can you kind of explain the difference between guardianship and adoption?
Guardianship and adoption. Okay, so when a child is brought into protective custody, parents work to get their kids back, or not. Some kids are older and they don't want to lose that connection with their parent. So maybe they don't want to change their name, or maybe they remember mom and dad or have fond memories, or something, you know, is very significant to them. And children 12 and older can have a say-so and they should be listened to, and their wishes should be taken into consideration. Sometimes they don't want to terminate their parents' rights. There's a legal termination of parental rights that happens when adoptions take place. Right now I have another adoption that I'm working on, and one boy is going to be adopted and his brother is going to go into guardianship with the foster father, who's been a very good mentor and influence on him. But this other boy wants to be adopted by the foster mom. So they don't terminate parental rights when there's a guardianship, but they do terminate parental rights when there is an adoption. They terminate parental rights, and then they have to wait for an appeal period to see if either parent wants to appeal the decision to terminate. And that's like a 60 to 90 day window. And when that's over, then adoption can move forward. So sometimes it's a matter of choice. Sometimes it's a matter of where things are, and it's the best decision for the circumstances.
Okay.
There's no one size fit all.
Right. So last week, Rose joined me and we were talking about intensive service foster care. How does that play a part into adoption?
Intensive service foster care, because we do have we have a family that has intensive services foster care is paid at a higher rate because the children have higher needs. They may require more direct supervision, constant redirection, and in-house services and supports. That rate is more than double what the base foster care rate is, like $1,000, right? So maybe that's $2,500 or $2,600, right? That rate does not translate into adoption assistance. So when they negotiate a rate for adoption, they'll go to the $1,000, and then there's something called a special care increment that's maybe $100 or $200 to meet special needs of the child. And it's all focused on meeting the needs of the child. That's what that amount is for. So you can adopt children from the intensive services foster care program that, hopefully we're providing enough services and supports to mitigate a lot of the trauma, and that they come down to a regular level. That's always been the goal of that program, is to give them all the services that they need so that they can step down into a lower level. But if you're going from intensive services foster care into an adoption, it will reduce the amount you will be reimbursed, or it will reduce the amount that you will be paid monthly. But you're not doing it for payment. You're doing it because you're opening your heart and your home to a kid, and you're giving them permanency and making them a permanent member of your family.
Okay, so the child doesn't have to step down. They can go straight from ISFC to...
They can go straight to ISFC into adoption, and the county adoption worker will talk with the adoptive parent and bring them in, and they negotiate a rate. But right now, ISFC, and I've called the state and I've talked to the people there, ISFC is not considered that part of that adoption assistance program. They're not matching that rate. So it's good to know if you're going in that they're not trying to cheat you or anything, because I've had conversations with adoptive parents and stuff, and I said, no, it's just that the state doesn't recognize that level for adoption. So that's how things are.
Okay.
But you don't adopt for the money. You adopt because you love the child.
All right. And we would hope that the kids would step down before adoption.
You would hope, but if a parent is well versed in getting resources and support services and mental health or whatever they need for that child, and are willing to advocate and step up and get what they need, that I would hope it wouldn't prevent them from moving forward with permanency and not delaying it. But it's really important to have your resources. I've had an adoptive mother who adopted a subset of girls, and it can be sometimes difficult getting services after adoptions because you don't have all the supports of foster care, the mental health or everything. So sometimes it's good to get all that lined up ahead of time, or to know, and there are online resources, and there's help out there. The Child Welfare League of America, the Child Welfare Information Gateway, and a few other places on the internet. But the counties, when they meet with the parent at adoptive placement, give them a letter with a list of resources, from schools to mental health to physical, doctor's appointment, everything, and an adoption hotline number for them to call. So they try to provide as much help as they can.
Okay. So I guess, let's see if there's any questions in the chat real quick. So Cynthia says, wow, I didn't know any of this. Great information. Thank you, Debbie and Stephanie. And then Fatima says, if looking to adopt but are more interested in a smaller child, will it only be for kids that are with Parents by Choice or other agencies as well?
I'm not sure I understand.
So, if you are a foster parent with Parents by Choice, I'm assuming it's any kid that is, or not any kid, but the kid that is placed in your home.
So the way we choose, so when you're going through the assessment process, our resource family approval supervisor will work with you, find out what you want, where your strengths lie, what your parenting style is, what your background is, and write your assessment, and then determine with you what type of child would be best in your home. We have a placement specialist who does a fabulous job of trying to match the child's needs and a family to meet those needs. It's about matching the child's needs, not matching the family's needs to a child. Does that make sense? We are finding families for the kids, not finding kids for the families, although it sometimes seems that way. It's we really want to match a family to that has the tools and techniques and the ability to meet what that child needs. So, and then the county will determine if you are a good fit for that child. Sometimes they'll have multiple families because they call multiple agencies when they're looking for placements. And so they may have multiple families to choose from. Sometimes if it's a sibling set or a child with a specific difficult behavior, they might have fewer families to choose from. But we do our best, and you are always able to say, no, I don't think that's a good match, or take the placement. So it's important to know what you can handle, what you want, and the age range that you want. The younger the children that you want, like 0 to 5, they will make sure that you're a concurrent planning home. It's best if you will take a sibling set, because chances are children 0 to 5 have a sibling, and sometimes multiple siblings. We really need families to take teens, and teens sometimes they won't tell you, but they want to belong to a family, and they might want to be adopted, but sometimes it's not something they'll bring up. And it's really important when you have a child in your home to be honest with them and let them know what's going on, and don't, like, I've had some parents say, I'm not going to tell them they're adopted. And it's like, that's no, that's a big no-no. Because, well, especially today with DNA and all those DNA kits, you can find out quickly. And some families have been shocked doing their DNAs. It's called Life Books, and it's kind of like a scrapbook, and you follow the child, like take a picture when they come into your home, take a picture of the hospital they were born in. You do a family tree that shows, mom and dad and everything. You put it in child appropriate language. If mom had a drug problem, mommy was sick and wasn't able to care for you. Instead of saying, oh, mom was a heroin addict. Because it's really important that the child know their history, because when they grow up and they hit different developmental milestones, they will go to the stage of identity and individuation, which means who out there looks like me, who has the same mannerisms that I do, who has, the little crook in the back of their finger or whatever. And so they'll start looking, and with social media and DNA tests and friends and word of mouth, and if they were born in this community and they were adopted in this community, they'll look. And if they are unaware or are shocked that they're adopted, that's not a healthy place emotionally or mentally to be. And so it's always good to be open and honest and give them more of the story as they get older and can assimilate that information into their life and who they are and their identity. And there is a list of adoption competent therapists in California. There aren't many, but it's a good place to go, because there's a lot of mental health that can come up and emotional trauma that can come up. And if you don't get an adoption competent therapist to work with your family, it can actually do more harm. So, because the child can project on the adoptive mother all the anger and feelings and trauma from the bio mom, and if a therapist doesn't see that and that's what's happening, it can divide a family. So, yeah, that was a long answer.
So hopefully that answers your question, Fatima. And then Tia asks, I have a special needs son, nonverbal. Would that be a bad situation for being a foster, or can I foster younger?
I think if you came in and had an evaluation, we would take into consideration, how are you handling your current son, and are you meeting his needs, and are you doing a great job, and do you have love in your heart for more children? It doesn't eliminate the possibility of you adopting or fostering with us. It doesn't there's no automatic screen out with that. In fact, we could see that as a very big strength, that you have the ability. We have one foster parent who has a child in a wheelchair, and she was I think she was a medical something, and she's done great. And I think that child's coming up for adoption. I'm not quite sure, but certainly get in touch with us. We'd be more than happy to have you apply, and we can assess it and talk to you and find out what your interests are and what you would like to do. But that does not eliminate your, no, it doesn't preclude you from being a foster parent at all. We would totally see that as a strength.
So I know this has happened before, where a child is placed in a foster home, but that foster parent doesn't want to adopt that child.
Yeah.
So in those cases, does Parents by Choice look at other homes within Parents by Choice to adopt the child, or kind of do they just let the county go for it?
Okay, so because we know our families and we've worked with the child and know the child, we rack our brains to see if we have any families that would be a great fit. And maybe they've already met in some passing capacity, like we used to and will again have our foster parent support meetings and events. So when that happens, but what happens in that situation is the county social worker is the adoption worker, and their job is to find a family and match that child to a family. So they have something called adoption exchanges. So as a county adoption department, they have all the profiles of the children and sibling sets. And as an adoption agency or a foster family adoption agency that's promoting families that only want to adopt, we would have a family profile. And I have sent our family's profile that they've made to county adoption departments when I know that they have a specific child or know that this family is really good. But typically this isn't something that we do all the time. We do adoptions based on the families coming in to foster to adopt, not just come in to adopt. But this is how the counties find, like you said, those children who are in a home that doesn't want to adopt them but need an adoptive home. So county social workers will meet with agencies that have families and they have the kids, and they'll exchange information and try to match. And then maybe they'll get 2 or 3 families and evaluate them and then start visits. So if you're a family and you don't want to adopt, but you have a child that's going to be adopted in your home, you have to help them be prepared to meet other families. It could be the family wants to come over and take them out for ice cream, or maybe the county social workers coming to pick them up to take them to meet a family. And then maybe it's all day, and then maybe it's overnight, and then maybe it's over the weekend. And so if you're not willing to adopt, then you have to support that child and that relationship and be positive and encouraging and open and warm and listen to the child and share, your feedback, and sometimes even talk to the potential adoptive family. Well, this is what I've done when this behavior shows up, and this is how this child likes to be soothed, and this is their favorite meal, and when they go to bed they like to have this stuffed animal to help them. It helps in the bonding process. But that's what happens when families don't want to adopt and they have kids in their home that need an adoptive home. The counties will search for families.
Okay. So you mentioned that the families have to make a profile?
Well, yes. When I did work at an adoption agency, that was an adoption agency. That was their primary thing. They made families do a profile. And so when I had the one family, 2 families, I had them do a profile. It was a picture of their family, introducing each member of their family, including their furry family members, and talk a little bit about themselves. For example, hi, I'm Mary Jones, and I'm a second grade teacher, and I enjoy gardening and bicycle riding and going to the coast. I have a beautiful 2-bedroom home, a bedroom just for you, and I have my mom and dad who live around the corner, so you'd have grandparents, and I have little Scruffy here who enjoys having his ears scratched and all that. So, and then it would have the contact information for like Parents by Choice, Debbie Magistrato, and then my contact information. And so I would send that to the county adoption departments, especially if I knew the workers that had the kids, the specific kids, and say, have this great family. And then sometimes they will in turn ask for the written assessment, which can be up to 25 pages. It's the written assessment we do that talks about your background, your childhood, your family, your extended family, what you do, your home. And then they can keep that on file. And then if they have children that are coming up and they need a family that might match, they can contact us. But yeah, at the other agency, they would have them make almost like scrapbooks, and we would take those to the county exchanges where all these adoption workers who had all these kids would be going through. That was before RFA. RFA has, with resource family approval, you're approved from the get-go for adoption instead of you were approved for foster care and then you had to be approved for adoption. So now it's all one. So it has streamlined the process and it has shortened the time frames to permanency, which is so much better. So much better.
Just to clarify on the written assessment, those are done during the process to become a foster parent. So it's nothing that you guys have to do.
No.
It's all on our workers.
Yes. And that's updated annually with any changes. And it's don't worry, you don't have to write a dissertation about your life.
Right. So the profile that the families have to make, it only has to be like 1 to 2 pages?
It was 1 page. It's just one page, just some highlights on what you are and stuff. That it was easier for me to tell them to make a profile for their family than say, hey, can you send me pictures? I didn't work with the family, so I didn't know the family that well, but I knew they wanted to adopt, and I had 2 kids that might be a good fit for them. So they did a great family picture with their boys and put in information about their occupation and what they like to do, how they spend their free time. And then I just asked her to put in my contact information, which she did. And they have a little kid in their home now. Our placement specialist matched them with a little girl.
That's always good.
Yeah, I'm excited.
So nothing else in the chat. So just to kind of clarify the process so there's a foster child in your home and
Yes.
they're ready for adoption.
Yes.
How does that process look?
Okay, so all throughout, from the time the child is placed, you as the foster parent, will know what's going on in the case. A lot of times the children will have visits with their family, and sometimes it could be once or twice a week. And then you'll know, because you're bringing the kids to the visits, if mom and dad stop visiting. And, the visit got canceled. Mom didn't show up or dad didn't show up. So there's usually some kind of trajectory, I guess, that shows which way the case is going to go. When it gets to the point where the county social worker says we're gonna, it doesn't look like we're gonna reunify, they'll start talking to you about your interest in adoption or guardianship. They will want to know before they terminate the parental rights. California does not like to make what is termed legal orphans. So they want the children in the home of the family that wants to adopt them before they terminate the parental rights. Sometimes things happen and the children will be in a home and parental rights will be terminated, and then sometimes something happens and the child has to be moved, or the family gives up on the child and the child moves. So we've had children come into care who have already had their rights terminated. And when we, as a placement specialist or an agency, get those kind of referrals for children with their parental rights already terminated, we really try hard to find families that are open and wanting to adopt without hesitation. And then we match and make sure it's a good fit. That's what happened with the other little family that I was talking about. But so when it gets to the point of terminating parental rights, they can terminate parental rights. Kids still in your home, still loving, feeding, going to school, or used to go to school. Things are crazy, and all that. And you just go on, building your life and going on vacation and doing what you do as a family. And then all the legal process part for the termination of parental rights passes. Then the county will say, okay, we're ready to negotiate an adoptive placement rate, AAP, adoption assistant program. And then you'll meet with them. And then the county's gathering all this information, all the medical, psychosocial on the child, information about the parents. There's certain things they have to give the adoptive parent, a complete medical history of what they know of the child, and certain information about education or any diagnoses and that type of thing. It can be a big packet if it's an older child, or a small packet if it's a younger child. They have to get all that information together. They have to, once they terminate parental rights, they have to send to the state to get a notice of freeing of child, and it goes in the records, whatever. I'm not sure. It's not public records because you guys can't get to it. So it's some kind of records. They track all the kids who have been freed, and they made sure all the process has been done right. Then they send that form back to the county, and when that's received, then we can move forward with adoptive placement and getting a filing date in the courts. And at the court finalization, families can invite anybody they want and have a big celebration, and judges are a lot less stiff. Sometimes they invite you up to the bench and have a picture with the judge. Sometimes they give out teddy bears or allow balloons in the courtroom or that kind of thing. It's a very, very celebratory event. But it's not, adoption is a lifetime journey. It's not just a single event. So that's important to remember too, because as the child gets older, they're going to have questions. And as they get older, the questions may get more difficult to answer. That's why it's important to have open communication and to be honest with them, and to have a book that reflects their journey and where they've been. And I've had some trainings where they suggest you keep a color copy of the book, because it's their book, and when they hit a certain age or a certain emotional state, they may want to destroy the book, but you want to make sure you have a copy of it, maybe a color copy on the side, because there's a lot of trauma. You can't have an adoption without a loss, so it's sometimes difficult.
Okay. There's nothing else in the chat that I'm seeing. Yeah, nothing else. So do you have anything you would like to close out with?
I would like everybody to consider adoption, because there are so many kids. There's 500,000 children nationwide in foster care. And that's too many. And kids that, from our transitional housing program, who are young adults with nobody to call their own or to be worried about them when they're out at night, or who do you call when you get a flat tire, or who do you call when you broke up with your boyfriend or whatever. And kids need parents, and they need a lifetime connection, and they need to be adopted. And it doesn't matter what age, whether it's an infant or someone who's 25. It's so important. I think everybody who is compassionate and flexible and loving and enjoys parenting should expand their families through adoption. But that's my opinion.
Well, thank you, Debbie, for joining me. You guys can catch me again, or in order to become a adoption family, foster family, resource parent, all those are pretty much the same thing.
Yeah, all of those are pretty much the same thing.
Just visit our website at www.parentsbychoice.net/programs/foster care. That will give you the information on how to become a foster parent, and how you can slowly become a foster to adoption parent. So if you guys have any questions, you can always hit us up at info@parentsbychoice.net, or you can call our office 209-478-4554. So thank you, Debbie.
Thank you. I look forward to meeting all of you.
So I'll see you guys again Tuesday at 3 o'clock. We'll be shooting in our Modesto office with Eddie, our social worker supervisor in the Modesto office, and we will be talking about the role of an agency social worker. So we'll see you guys then.